All right. Hello, everybody. This is Peter Svidler, back live on Chess24, and this time I'm doing something slightly different, foregoing the chess playing altogether and going into the full stand-up comedian mode to an extent, and answering the wall of text I can see on my screen up to my right there on a second screen. A quick shout out, although there is no chat this time, so I can't actually ask you this. I will monitor my screen for a second there to see if I'm actually streaming, but it does seem to work, and that's already a good start because, as we all know, I'm not the most dependable when it comes to broadcasting, and I'll just start with the earliest questions posted on the web page and go up. I can't promise I will cover every single question asked in the thread there, because there's quite a lot of them. Some of them will not require too much work, but some of them will probably lead to me going off on tangents, and that, as you probably already know, is very dangerous. My tangents get convoluted and lengthy. This is already one of those, and we've eaten 2 hours out of the show's time and haven't covered any subjects whatsoever. So let's perhaps just start with the first question in the thread. A question from Spassky Vadem. Are we likely to see Rapid and Blitz format in future Olympiads? In my opinion, the answer is probably no, mainly for logistic questions, logistic reasons, not questions. The Olympiad is a huge endeavor. There's this year, I don't remember the exact figures, but I think there were like 176 male teams in the open, and between 120 and 130 teams in the women's section, which means that if you attempt to organize a Rapid and Blitz event, all these thousands of people need to stay for additional, 3-4 days, and there's also a matter of organizing even the simple thing such as organizing pairings for every round will become a logistic nightmare. It's one thing dealing with all the results as they come in over a classical game, and then having a whole evening to create pairings for the next round. But when you need to do that for thousands of games every day, considering how big the tournament is, and you need to do this in any kind of normal time, I think it's not really very feasible. But it would be a fun idea if somehow miraculously those problems could be solved, and you could somehow make sure it runs smoothly, and breaks between rounds aren't 2 hours long. It would be a fun idea, and I would welcome it. But I haven't even seen calls for that particularly, and I think technical issues will be overwhelming. A question from Lifeslayer. Hi Peter, why do you think your Banter Blitz results are worse than Jan's? Mainly because I think I would probably do better if I talked less. And in particular in recent times, since I managed to arrange my things on my desktop so that I can actually pay close attention to what's happening in chat, I like communicating with chat quite a bit. It probably is the part of the banter which gives me the most pleasure, because there is actual banter back and forth going on in chat while I play. But in particular in 3-minute games, if I'm paying any kind of close attention to what's happening in chat, I'm giving a huge handicap to any decent player, and that impacts results. But also I'm simply slow and have almost no practice, which leads to me losing on time 2, 3, 4 times per session. Occasionally I also get crushed on the board. There's a good number of very good players playing on Chess24, and I make it a point to try and play the higher rated challenges more than the lower rated ones. But I think if I just shut up, my results would go up quite seriously. A question from Petrogradsky. Hi Peter, I'm a player that is often too optimistic about my own play, only to fall prey to my opponent's evil intentions. How I can best train to overcome that shortcoming? This is not actually such a rare thing, and it doesn't only belong at the lower, and no disrespect meant there, but at the lower echelons of chess players. There's the problem of only seeing, let's say, your tactics and missing tactics from your opponent it's a known problem, and many very strong players even exhibited this to a certain degree. If you are looking for a way to work around that, I would say that even a simple idea such as your opponent makes a move and you ask yourself, what does he want? Every single time you sit at the board, or if you don't get up as much as I do during games, if you just see your opponent make a move and you ask yourself, what is his plan? What are his ideas? Before proceeding to calculate yours, it will already, I think, make you much more aware of what's happening, and will, to a degree, improve you on that point. But also, I think this is generally more a tactical problem than a strategic one. Therefore, any kind of general tactics training will improve your awareness of your opponent's counterplay, and will make this problem, if not go away completely, then at the very least diminish greatly. And in particular, I think really well composed studies, not mate in 3 type studies, but let's say studies by the best composers, the ones that look like, endgames from practical play. Those generally require you not only to find the general theme, but very often if you want to solve them properly and solve them to the extent that you can actually tell yourself, I've solved this, you would need to find all the sources of counterplay for your opponent and refute those as well. And these days it's not really a huge problem to find collections of good studies on the internet, I'm pretty sure. So that would be a second part of my advice. Specifically, good endgame studies, I think, will force you to pay attention to counterplay, pay attention to not only your ideas but the ideas of your opponent. A question from Superfishy24. Hi Peter, what are your thoughts about the upcoming World Championship match? I'm hoping this will allow me to scroll a bit further up later in this list, because I suspect this will not be the only question on this subject, and although I have answered it in various media and also during Banter Blitz sessions more than once, I think it's getting closer and closer, so it makes sense to cover this once again. Although I don't really have anything new to say. What do I think? I think Magnus starts as a favorite. I think it probably will be reasonably close, and I also think how close it will be and how well Sergei will do depends greatly on whether he will be able to pose serious problem to Magnus in the opening phase of the game. Because I think if Magnus is completely untroubled in most or all of his black games and gets good positions with pressure, even a little bit of pressure in white games, Magnus overall, Sergei is a tremendous player, but Magnus is currently, I think, especially when he's playing well, and I think for World Championship matches, he generally manages to rouse himself to play, as well as he can. It's difficult to stay with him if this is the shape the match will take. But if, on the other hand, he will have to sort of jump around and will not be allowed to settle, let's say, on a simple repertoire, and will be put under pressure in the opening, then it becomes a lot closer, and then Sergei will definitely have his chances. I don't really know what else to say. It does seem, things I'm saying are definitely not, earth-shattering revelations, but I don't really have any inside info, and that's my view. I think a lot will depend on the opening phase and that much. Waiting it with great interest is another thing I can and should say, because I think it will be exciting, and there will be a lot to discuss and a lot to enjoy when it finally starts. Okay. A question from Slavov. Hello, Peter. In your opinion, who has the best chance in future 2-3 years for breakthrough into World Chess Elite? Say, enter top 10 in rating, play in all super elite super tournaments such as Grand Chess Tour, qualify to net candidates, or will we in near future see their only well-known faces from today? And how will you judge Jan Nepomniachtchi's chances to achieve such a goal? Jan has just had a tremendous result in the Olympiad, and he also, just before the Olympiad, won a very strong round-robin tournament in China, played very well there as well, so he's had a bit of a purple patch. But as I mentioned during, I think, the first one of my banters during the Olympiad, I spoke about, I think he was on 6 out of 6 at that point, not 7 out of 7, and he did start with 7 out of 7 in the Olympiad. The thing about Jan is that I don't think there was ever any question about his gift for chess. It has always been rather obvious that he is a tremendously capable player when he plays well, but he is also a reasonably rounded young man, and he has more interests in chess than just in life than just chess. And at times, I think he will be the first to agree that he approached chess a little bit lightly, and he wasn't really doing justice to the amount of talent he has. And if he finally started, working seriously on chess and, putting the hours in, there's no obvious limit to what he can achieve. He is a very, very strong player. Whether he will, in let's say 2-3 years, be as established in the elite circles as I don't know, Fabiano or Hikaru or Wesley, I guess you can count very firmly in that list now, because he's going from strengths to strengths. And I've seen a question. I've sort of leafed through the questions a little bit before going live, and there will be a question about Wesley somewhere in the list, and maybe I can cover it now, and the person who asked it will not feel particularly cheated. Wesley is a player who is progressing by leaps and bounds, and he is also, what impressed me, I spoke about this a little bit, what impressed me the most maybe about his play in Sinquefield Cup in particular, he also absolutely crushed board 3 in Olympiad, and was maybe, if you had to pick 1 out of 5 in the American Olympic team, you have to pick Wesley as maybe the driving force behind their victory. And having somebody of his strength on board 3 is obviously tremendously useful, because he scored an unbelievable amount of points on board 3, winning with white, black, you name it, winning a very important game against Jan Nepomniachtchi in the perhaps most important match of the Olympiad, one of the most important matches of the Olympiad between America and Russia. But he was playing, let's say, apart from a few key matches, he was playing people who are somewhat weaker than him. But during the Sinquefield Cup, he played with tremendous ease, and also with great pragmatism. And I'm not, this is not a criticism. It's a quality you don't often see in people as young as he is, and it will serve him very, very well in years to come, because this ability to conserve resources and to play practically and to know exactly what's required, and being able to to do exactly what's required in terms of results, not really caring about appearances or possible criticism from people who would maybe like you to play sharper for a win in every game. I think it will put him in good stead. And Wesley is tremendously strong these days. Names I expect to see in the top 10, top 5, which aren't there yet. I don't know exactly who to name. One name that sort of comes to mind, and I've heard only good things about the guy. I've never met him personally, but I have seen the games. Is Jeffrey Shong, who just won the under-20, being aged 15 himself. But whether he will be 27, 50 plus in 2 years, nobody can say. He might be, then again, he might not be. I think the current top 10 is so young that you will see them around for a while, and breaking into it will not be easy for anyone, but there will be, of course, some people coming in over the years. Hang on a second. Let me just check that everything works. Seems to be working. A question from Kazam Better. Hi Peter, in your last Banter Blitz you mentioned that when you were younger you read a lot of chess books. How did you manage to read so many chess books and not get bored out of your mind? Is there a specific way you went through the books, or did you just read cover to cover like a novel? This seems like a weird question, because when I was younger, and I hope the stream is still alive, because I seem to be having some internet problems which will be very, very unfortunate. I haven't had any for 2-3 days, and I seem to be getting all kinds of warning messages flashing on my screen right now. I hope the stream is not dead, and there's really no immediate way for me to check, but hope it's still alive. Back to the question. When I was young, I would just stare at you incredulously if you asked me that question. Chess books didn't bore me then, and frankly they don't bore me now, but the fact that you think that they might is frankly a little bit alarming, because they shouldn't. Not good books anyway, and there's plenty of good books out there. And yes, I was reading them cover to cover, especially in those years. I still do even these days, but in those years, I would be reading them cover to cover and enjoying the process. Seems like we've had some issues with the connection, for which I apologize. It's not seemingly anything I've done, just my Wi-Fi playing up exactly when it really shouldn't. If it continues happening, I'm sorry. There's not really very much I can do apart from stopping the stream and restarting, but since we seem to be back on, I don't really want to do that right now. A question from TextMax22. Hi Mr. Svidler. What is the most effective way you/one improved calculating skill, and who is your favorite position composer book? I don't really I keep on telling people to solve studies and look at studies and do all those things, but I don't actually do that much of it myself anymore, and it would be hard for me to name any one composer in particular. As for studying tactics, once again, there's not much I can say that will be new. There's a lot of good tactical compilations as books. There's also every single website in operation these days, and of course Chess24, top of the list, will have tactics trainers which will allow you to solve tactical problems, perhaps even tailored to your skill level, right on the website without leaving the website. So plenty of tools available, and I already mentioned that solving studies is very beneficial. I still think that 30 minutes into the show. As for the favorite composer, can't really name one. I solved a lot of studies when I was a kid. The classical ones, the Troitsky ones, all the Kubel and the rest of it. But I'm pretty sure there have been developments since, and perhaps there are some people out there who are better qualified to speak on the subject. A question from Thomas R. Hi Peter, my question might be both too obvious and tricky to answer. Any comments on the Olympiad, including your thoughts on the Russian board order, and not just the fact that you got board 6? That actually is... we don't know if I got board 6 or 7. We just know I did not get boards from 1 to 5. But yeah, I was probably the next cab off the rank, or at least I would hope so. My thoughts on the Olympiad in general, I think, once again, I covered it, if you can call it coverage. I spoke at reasonable length in my interest to the bunters. I think the best team won. I think the Ukrainians were clearly the second best team in the competition. There were a number of fantastic individual performances. I singled out Eugenio Torre in my last Banter Blitz, but also, as people immediately reminded me in chat, Andrei Volokitin's 8.5 out of 9 is perhaps the performance that carried the Ukrainians over the potential rough times. He won a tremendously important game against Grishuk in their match against Russia, which was a huge big deal, obviously, in that match with Black against Grishuk on board 4. He won a number of incredibly important games. Although, others also played well. He was by no means a one-man's effort, but 8.5 out of 9 is something to be very, very proud of. Wesley So I mentioned, Yanni Pomnishi, there's also a number of great performances from, the non-top 3 teams. Eric Hansen's Jess Bra played fantastically well despite losing. Had he won the winning position he had against Volokitin, he would have had a result which was probably better than Volokitin's. So lots of tremendous personal performances. Both the world champion and the challenger played, I think, well. And that sort of is a nice segue to the second part of the question. Magnus lost rating points, but his rating point is so high that he still, he had a performance of over 2,800. It still drew criticism because he didn't win some games against lower rated players, but generally I think he played rather well. He would have, I guess, preferred to score a little bit heavier than he did, but hang on a second, I'm just checking if it's live or not. Sorry about that. There's very little feedback available to me right now, so I'll just briefly check if what I'm saying is being transmitted, and then I'll return to the topic at hand. So Magnus scored +4, I think, or maybe even +5 on board 1, playing obviously against a stronger position, because Norway, and that actually probably deserves to be mentioned, Norway finished in the top 5 for the first time in their history. Magnus's result played a large part in that, although he also wasn't the only player playing well on that team. As for the Russian team's board order, it was an interesting idea, and since finishing third will most certainly be considered to be let's put it like this, not a success in Russian chess circles. I've already heard some people saying that it was a mistake to do what they did, and they should have put Kramnik on 1 and Karekin perhaps on 2. And also, the 3 and 5 lineup is not obvious. But the thing with the Russian team is that everybody's so good. Not to mince words. Sorry. Everybody's so good that you can more or less put it back to front and it will still perform. It will fight for first. Maybe it will not finish first, but it will fight for first. And I think the one issue you could maybe argue was with the lineup they chose was that it put a lot of strain on Karyakin. He played a lot of games. People will play a lot of games with only one reserve player, but he played really. I think he maybe played 10 games as well. Definitely played 9. I should have this looked up before speaking, but you can do it for me. And he grew, I think, noticeably tired towards the end of the Olympiad, and that contributed to a run of unpleasant games he played in. I mean, in the last 3 rounds, he had a game against Caruana, which I think on a normal day, not even on a good day for him, but on a normal day for Sergei, he probably would have converted into a full point, and that was in a very, very important match against the Americans. And then he had a very long and very painful game against Mamedyarov, which he managed to save miraculously. He defended tremendously well from a position many people would have given up in, frankly. And he managed to save half a point there, which was very important. And then he played against India and lost to Hare Krishna. But I think that was... And once again, I don't want to criticize anything. I was... not particularly in touch with the players. I spoke to Jan, who is a good friend of mine, a little bit during the Olympiad. But apart from that, I have absolutely no inside information on what was going on inside the team. And Jan, I wasn't even asking him for any insights, because I think it would be somewhat unethical for me to interject myself into what was going on there. But I think if they felt they could lighten his load a little bit, he would have done very... I mean, before his game with Caruana, he was on +4 out of maybe 7 rounds, I want to say. He was doing very, very well on board 1, and Kramnik absolutely destroyed board 2. So I don't think you can make the argument that the lineup was incorrect. I think at some critical moments, the critical matches, and Russia played 2, maybe 3 critical matches in this tournament. The properly all important matches: 1 against Ukraine, 1 against the US, and 1 against India. And none of those 3 really went according to plan. But I don't think that was to do with the board order. And what it was to do with, I do not have an opinion, because you need to know what was going on inside the team for you to formulate any kind of an opinion. Otherwise, I think it will be just idle speculation. And I think that should probably cover my thoughts on the Russian team performance in general and on the board order. I think it had every chance of working swimmingly. Kramnik scored a ton of points on board 2. Nepomniachtchi destroyed board 4, and Karyakin was up to a point one of the definite leaders in a fight for individual medals on board 1. So don't think that was the problem. A question from Kramnik's student. I am not a very good player and play only for fun on Chess24. However, I find that my play fluctuates a lot each day. One day I play well and gain hundreds of points, and next day manage to lose 100 to 150. How does one manage to keep the playing level somewhat consistent? I think you've answered your own question there in the way you phrased it. If you're doing this for fun, you probably should expect the variance to be huge. And if you want consistency, you should probably first and foremost you should tell yourself that I am, from this moment onwards, actually aiming for consistency, and I want my results to reflect my playing strength, and that will be a good first step. More generally, working on chess improves your consistency, but that all falls under the same canopy, so to speak. If you start taking chess more seriously, I think the results will reflect that. But if you if you're only playing online Blitz, and even that you can do sort of more seriously and less seriously, and you seem to be on the less serious side. This is once again not a criticism. Chess does not need to be a job, but if it's just something you do to pass the time, there will be a lot of variance involved, of course. Grand Gravitas says, when you work on chess by yourself at home, how do you usually structure your training? It's a lengthy question, but there's also speaking of openings, I imagine that at top level you need to be prepared for everything. How do you determine when and which opening lines to repeat, especially those that are not topical and that could be used as surprise weapons by your opponents? As for my training regimen, I am, it's become a bit of an inside joke. I say I don't work on chess, and people kind of say, yeah, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. He says he doesn't work on chess, and it's a kind of a perpetuating cycle. I do work on chess, but not nearly as much as other top players, and my working regimen should not be taken as any kind of an example for anyone. As for working on openings and repeating lines which might happen, I more or less stopped doing that. I try to prepare for the stuff that is reasonably likely my opponents will play, and if they play something I did not expect, I consider myself to be experienced enough and frankly just old enough to not be frazzled by that too much, and I think I should be capable of working these things out over the board. So these days my preparation for the games during tournaments is not very in-depth. I try to keep my head as fresh as possible, and to do that I only repeat stuff that worries me or that is very, very likely to happen. And yeah, don't do a lot of work during tournaments, and definitely don't repeat the whole perimeter, so to speak. If I were to try and repeat the whole perimeter before every game, I think I would be these days completely incapable of playing at a decent level, because that is tiresome. Nasty King 37. Hi Peter, I've been enjoying your Banter Blitz sessions. Thank you. I'm currently looking for a secondary weapon as black versus 1d4. I thought about the Dutch defense. Would you recommend it? I think it should be good for surprising at my level, which is 2150. The Dutch, and I hope this is I hope your primary weapon is the Grunfeld, because that would be pleasant for me as a lifetime Grunfeld aficionado. But whatever it is you're playing as your main opening, I guess it's something well established and sound. But as a secondary weapon, the Dutch is fine, and the Dutch also has the advantage, as you mentioned. It's a good surprise weapon, and not a lot of white players, especially at club level, will know exactly what to do against it. So I think the Dutch has much to recommend it, especially since the positions are generally very sharp and offer a lot of chances for black to gain a lot of counterplay and to play for all three results, not just for equality and draw. Although strategically, of course, it's riskier than most of the quote-unquote classical openings. Let's say I would feel reasonably comfortable saying Nimzo equalizes. I've never really played the Nimzo seriously with either color, but nothing I've seen in my many years of observing high-level chess would make me doubt that statement. I'm not sure if Dutch actually equalizes, but that shouldn't really trouble people all that much, I think. I think objective worth of openings is overrated. If you like the character of play that the opening offers, you should just play it. And the Dutch, I think the Dutch is a decent idea. A question from somebody whose nickname consists of letters L, I think, repeated ad nauseum. I would like to hear your opinion on Russian team's performance just held in the Olympiad held in Baku. Also, you spoke very highly of Kramnik, saying the manner in which he seems to be approaching his chess is absolutely fantastic. Could I explain this in more detail? I've covered the team's performance, I think, in reasonable detail already. As for Kramnik, for years and years, his approach to chess was extremely scholastic. Let's put it like this: he was, a firm believer in trying to solve his problems so as to completely eliminate them. He would study openings to have a large advantage with white and a draw with black, not equality but draw in most openings. And I know, since for a period of time I worked for him and with him, and I know his approach reasonably well. And then in recent years, I think, faced with a situation where he's done most things people can do in chess 3 times over, he just told himself, I would like, once again, I haven't spoken to him about this in great detail, but what it looks like from the sidelines is that he told himself, I would like to actually enjoy playing chess a little bit more. And he started playing offbeat openings and playing positions where analysis doesn't play a great role, but chess understanding does. And he has no issues when it comes to chess understanding. He does understand the game on a tremendous level, and I think the results show that. It's, once again, I mentioned this before in many different forums, but it's worth repeating that it's not just that he started playing one b3 and one e3 and knight f3, g3 and all these kinds of things he never played before. His general attitude towards working on chess and playing chess changed from this is a math problem, let's solve it, to this is a very enjoyable board game at which I am exceedingly good, so let's just beat people because I play better than them. And yeah, it seems to be working quite well for him. A question from Wallace Sean. Hi Peter, I'm a big fan of yours. Thank you, Wallace. I'm cheering for you in Natal Memorial, and this will be a recurring theme, so perhaps I can just bulk thank everybody who is wishing me good luck in Natal Memorial and not read out those anymore. And thanks people. I will try not to disappoint you horribly in Moscow. And this will hopefully give us an opportunity to actually put some stuff on the board for a second, because I've spoken to the tech wizards at Chess24, and there are capabilities here for me to switch from this view and to show some stuff on the board. First of all, I'm referring to the well-known position after, and let's get this position. He is talking about the position after g4, c4, f3, oops, sorry, f3, d5. This is the f3 Grunfeld, a line very dear to my heart, because I cannot understate, or overstate rather, just how much time I spend trying to find a way to present this for the videos. This is the line that perhaps gave me the most trouble out of everything I covered for the Grunfeld videos. Knight c6 long castle. Knight 6 long castles. Now, of course, black has a few options here. In the past, f5 has been very popular. However, you said in your video series on the Grunfeld that you recommend queen d6, and I do, because you recently had run into some serious chess problems with f5. My question is, what have you discovered to make f5 so bad, even after f5 was so popular for so many years? I would like to know what the chess problems you recently ran into are, especially since you yourself were a practitioner of f5 for so many years, and also because I myself play f5. On the same note, would you recommend I stick with my usual f5 or quit it and switch to queen d6? I think you intended to answer it in the files, but unfortunately they never came. Well, the files did come, but maybe I cut the parts concerning f5 from them. And this probably will interest more than just Wallace, so let's cover this in some detail. The position after f5, e5, knight b4, I will not be able to give you the entire move orders here, but the more I studied the positions here, starting with, let's say, h4, bishop e6, and king b1, for instance, or a3, all of these types of positions, the more I came to the conclusion that black perhaps equalizes with absolutely correct play, but even that, to my eyes, and keep in mind that we're talking about my attitude towards this when I was recording, and that was some time ago, obviously, not this month. A year and a bit, I think, has passed since I recorded this material. But the more I analyzed it, and I really took great pains trying to work this out for the videos, because I felt that, you know, F3 is incredibly popular these days, and it's incredibly important to get this right, because if people really want to follow my recommendations, they will be, you know, running into this line a great deal. And the positions that arise here, I just stopped liking them at some point, and I think it would, you know, it would require me actually going into my files and starting to show some in-depth analysis of these positions, which I don't think is a good idea for this particular show. But I think that objectively Queen d6 is better, even though it's not without its problems, and there have been developments in the Queen d6 lines as well since I recorded the videos, which probably objectively will require an update at some point, because White managed to find some ways of dealing with what I was recommending there, which I don't believe refute my recommendations, but notes on those positions need to be updated, and more pointers need to be given to people to play these lines. And these lines are very, very complicated. But I do believe that Queen d6 objectively is stronger than f5. Whether you should actually switch between the two, and whether you should start playing Queen d6 now, simply because I said that I, in my analysis, couldn't make f5 completely equalize, it's a matter of taste. If f5 is working for you, and at your level you aren't really being pressured particularly after f5, e5 knight before, there's really no need for you to do anything different. But I personally switched to Queen d6, you know, with varying success, frankly, but it's more to do with my play than the objective assessment of this position, I believe. And I know that many people are playing these lines based on my analysis and seemingly doing reasonably well. So it still remains a matter of taste, but my opinion has not changed. I still think that Queen d6 is a better move than f5. A question from Scorpius. Hi Peter, I have a provocative question for you. I've heard strong chess players claiming there is no reason to study classical games of all GMs, since chess players have improved a lot since the classic era of chess. They claim that players should study top recent GM games only, since the opening theory, the art of defense and gameplay has improved a lot during all these years. Do you agree with that sentiment? And what can a modern player learn from the masters of the past? Another question which I think I'm very much on the record on this subject, but I would like to call on a higher authority, so to speak, and my opinion is that it's useful to read books about the best players of the past, but more perhaps strikingly, because very few people, I think, exemplify the modern approach to chess better than Magnus himself. Magnus is on the record saying it's very useful to study classics and read books in general, and he knows a lot about the classics. And what can you learn from it? I think it very much depends, but broadening your chess culture and gaining access to the way great players of yesteryear thought about chess, I think can only be a good thing. Sorry, losing my voice there a little bit. Maybe I can do something about it. So my opinion is, good books on the best players of the past, and generally just games of, let's say, world champions and the best players of the past. They present a wealth of material that you will assimilate somehow, and it will it will definitely not harm you and probably will be quite useful in some ways. A question from KP Rabba. 54. I find it easy to calculate in open positions with less pieces, but get confused in closed positions or with lots of pieces. Is that natural? What should I do to improve my board vision and calculation skills in crowded positions? Another one of the questions where you probably will not like my answer because it's so, ridiculously simplistic, but it's, the only thing I can really say. As with just about every other skill in chess, I think what you need is practice. Lots and lots of it, and also once again, this seems like a specifically tactical issue, an issue with tactical awareness, and those things are your starting point should be, I guess, working on your tactical prowess by solving a lot and working on that side of the game. Okay, question from Throne. Hi Peter, I'm training children in my local club and I have the feeling that they get better in chess in general. However, if they start playing, they're playing just too fast. As a result, they're blundering stuff. How did you start playing slower? Is there some trick I could tell them? I actually started off being a reasonably slow player. I mentioned this in one of the recent Banters, but as a kid, until maybe the age of 12 or 13, I was a huge time travel merchant. I had, Grishuk level time travels in every single game, more or less, and then I had to teach myself to play faster because in those years, I really liked getting to the bottom of things, and I liked, thinking about the position to the fullest of my understanding. I think generally, if you give them more time, I think they will be tempted to play slower. So it's a pity it's not a conversation, because I would like you, in reply, are they playing Blitz or classical? Because if all they're playing is very fast, rapid, and Blitz, then it's one thing. If they're still, if they're playing reasonably slow time control and still treating it as Blitz, then perhaps you need to address that question somehow. But also, the problem with me answering that question is that I really am not a coach, and I have absolutely zero experience working with young kids and trying to teach them anything at all. So perhaps not the best person to ask, but from my personal experience, as I said, I had to teach myself to play faster, not slower. Chicago Dave says, my question has to do with interaction of objectivity and optimism about one's position. The former is obviously of paramount importance at all levels of chess, but the latter also seems important, at least at my level, which is 2100, to fuel one's fighting spirit, resourcefulness, and will to win. Among top players, Aronian seems most likely to overrate his chances as compared to objective evaluation. Past optimism might include Tal and Larsen. What are your views about these interaction? And are you an overrater or an underrater? Has it helped to hurt your results? Thanks for the great play and commentary, Dave. Thanks, Dave. Very tempted to say you're a legend, Dave, but very few people will know the quote. But still, I mean, shout out to the 2.5 Flight of the Conchords fans out there who might be watching. Sorry about that. Yeah, the problem exists. If you call it a problem, perhaps to my mind, the most good optimistic player in history, or at least maybe it's because I'm from St. Petersburg and it feels closer to home, was Mark Taimanov. He was very, very famous for always thinking he was better / winning. I don't know about Lev. In recent times, in particular, when I'm wearing my commentator's hat, so to speak, I've had some very, very amusing press conferences where One name that, in current years comes to mind the most, I think, would be Kramnik, surprisingly, because I praised his chess understanding not 5 minutes ago. But these days, if you analyze with him, it would appear as if he feels every single position he has is tremendously good. And it led to even some unintentional hilarity. I don't know if you have access to these records on Chess24. Probably you do, I guess, if you look hard enough. If you can find the press conference he had in Norway with Topalov, with Aronian as well, but in particular with Topalov, that was absolute comedy gold. He had a position which he defended with great resourcefulness and managed to draw. But it was a very, very dangerous position. And then during the press conference, they basically, throughout the press conference, both were claiming that they were playing for a win. Whereas, looking at the position, only one of them should have. And that was great fun. But as for the more general question, I think overrating your chances is better than underrating them. Because if you constantly feel you're worse, it gets you down. As you mentioned, morale and fighting spirit. Those are very, very important components at top level in particular, where the edges are so small, and it's a depressing frame of mind to be in constantly if you constantly think that your position is not particularly good. And I belong firmly in the underraters camp these days. It's not always been that way, but these days there's no doubt in my mind that I tend to think my position is worse than it actually is, and it's probably hurt my results to a degree. I don't know, to what a degree, but it definitely isn't helpful. And I think it's just to do with a lot with the kind of person you are, and your life experiences and so on. And these days, I guess my general outlook is not as shiny as all that. Question from Rake. My question was skipped during the last Q&A, and I would like to repeat it. What's your favorite Tarantino movie? It's hard to say. Actually, it's not really that hard to say. It still is. It still is Pulp Fiction. I'm pretty certain. Although I enjoyed, I think, more or less every single one of them, but I had an occasion to rewatch Pulp Fiction a couple of times recently. Once I just decided that I haven't watched it in such a long time that it would be useful for me to reacquaint myself with it. And then this summer I watched it with my kids, which drew sharp criticism from my wife, but I thought, they're 14 and I don't think there's anything in it they haven't heard before or encountered in some way, shape or form, and it's time for them to start getting acquainted with the modern classics. And I still like this movie a lot. Discombobulated. Hi Peter, how should you approach a game against an opponent who is known to play only for a draw? Is it advisable to go for offbeat risky openings to unbalance the position, or should you play your normal openings and risk getting dead equal positions? In particular when playing black, of course. It very much depends on a number of things. What your repertoire is in general, also how big of a skill gap you feel you have between yourself and that hypothetical opponent. Because in many cases you feel, if this is likely to happen, in many cases you're not that sad about a draw with black against somebody who is of relatively close to your strength, because it will give you, if you're absolutely sure you will make a draw, or let's say if you're playing in a tournament where you can actually offer a draw. These days schedules are quite punishing, and if you're absolutely certain you can have half a day off, it's not such a horrible thing. But if your tournament situation absolutely demands that you need to win this game, I probably would recommend switching from your main repertoire and playing something not even necessarily offbeat, but something they are not as likely to have prepared for this particular game. Because you find that players like this, they are very, very comfortable, and they will have lines prepared which will lead to more or less forced equality against your main repertoire openings. But if you force them to think for themselves, what people who want to make a draw with white, overriding all other considerations, what they tend to do is they tend to go for simplifications. And you can even allow simplifications if every single simplification costs them a little bit of something. Famously, I think Nigel Short in one of the interzonals had to make one draw out of the last 2 games to qualify for the candidates. I think it was Beal 93, but I could be wrong. And he played an exchange French against Mikhail Gurevich, took on d5 on move 3, and still did not make a draw with white. And that's Nigel Short we're talking about, who was at some point number 3 in the world, played a world championship match, tremendously strong player. So you don't even need to go for necessarily particularly sharp positions, but you do need to make sure that their subconscious desire to make the game, as dry and as boring as possible costs them at every turn. It will not be a lot, but it will be a little bit, and you need to keep that in mind. But in general, yeah, if your main opening, let's say, is Queen's Gambit accepted as black, you probably want to play something else. You don't want to give your opponents an immediate way to swap off half the board. A question from Rubaluba. Hi Peter, do you think Magnus Carlsen could draw or win any of the games if he met the other 9 players in the top 10 simultaneously? Can GMs at this level force a draw, even with many games to think about? If Magnus was forced to give a simul to the other members of the top 10 with mixed colors, or all games with white, I don't know. With all games with white, he would not score 0 points. That's certain, because you probably should, in those extreme circumstances, go for heavy theory and try and get some games off. But he would suffer badly, and he would score, he would finish in heavy minus. Because also you have to, people would approach this just as I described in my answer to the previous question. People would play non-theoretical offbeat stuff whenever possible, just not to give him an easy out. And he would end up, having 9 time troubles against very strong opposition. I don't think he would lose every single game, but he would not do well in such a match. And if colors were mixed, with every single black game thrown into the mix, his expected result would go down. A question from Brother. If you do, then how often are you imagining your pieces on the perfect squares during the game? I use this method when I'm out of theory. I don't have an appropriate plan, and I cannot find any good prophylactic move. And then there's a lengthy line, which is really, really weird, but so I probably will not put it on the board, because from reading the line, it seems to me that white were pretty much a full rook up by move 8 and then encountered some issues. But if we take the question more generally, if you find a position in which no immediate calculations spring to mind, you do think about how to improve the position of your pieces. It's one of the ways to approach any position where no immediate solution exists. And yes, it would be very hard for me to quantify how often I do this, but thinking about where the pieces belong is definitely a part of my thinking process. A question from Exarian. Hi Peter, how can I step up my chess meme game to be as great as yours? Would really appreciate any advice. I think my answer probably will not be particularly helpful, because I would suggest you watch a lot of Twitch, but I think a better solution for both of us would be for me to watch less Twitch. Not sure that's possible though. Egmont says, hi Peter, I really appreciate your shows and commentary. I would like to know how was the chess education in Russia. We heard rumors that you were chess educated in school and we're really jealous. I guess there's an apostrophe missing there. And we are really jealous about that. There was no chess education in school specifically, but every district in a large city, and I lived in the second biggest city in the country, had a specialized, they're called something else now, but they were called pioneers' houses or pioneers' palaces sometimes, and those would have all kinds of things you could study as a child, including chess. And there was also a great number of chess coaches, many of them quite good, and most of them are actually still working. So when the question arose of maybe teaching one of my children chess, me and my wife, we found out to our amusement, and also we weren't particularly happy about that because it presented its own problems, that whenever we took him, he would most likely be coached by people who knew me as a child, and that would be actually problematic for him, because it would draw all kinds of comparisons he didn't really need, at the age of 8. But no, there was no particular chess education in school, if you mean proper school. But there were lots of good coaches and lots of places to go to, and I think most importantly, chess was a lot more prestigious as a potential thing a child might do compared to the West, which led to the parents not laughing at the idea and actually bringing the kids to those places. I think that was the single most important factor in the prevalence of chess and the Soviet chess for such a long period of time. A question from Danger Mouse. Peter, thanks for taking questions. As a middle-aged player, I can tell the youngsters that they do not know how lucky they are that such things exist. I would like to ask you the same question I recently asked Boris Gelfand in the Q&A that his publisher broadcast. Have you changed your style as you got older? Boris gave an interesting answer, praising Kramnik's constant reinvention. This is actually a subject I touched on during this Q&A already. He also said that having a style is absolutely essential. I think you just naturally gravitate towards a style. I don't think you can wake up one day and think to yourself, I need to create a style for myself so that people can pigeonhole me better. But you do, from a reasonably early age, I think, you do discover what types of positions you play better, what types of positions make you feel happier playing them, and that will determine your style. And as for my style, I still feel I'm at my best playing sharp, unclear positions with dynamic play, and I feel most at home doing that. But people don't really let me do that very often, which led me to I had to diversify, and I had to teach myself to do other things, and my style in general, I think, became drier and not as single-minded. I don't only aim at mayhem on the board. I can play dry technical positions. I can even aim for dry technical positions from the get-go if that's required. But I still get the most joy out of sharp tactical fights. SR Chernik says, that actually is the question I specifically begged you guys not to ask. What's the best way to improve and reach a decent level? Let's just briefly repeat what I always say, especially if we're talking about club player level. Play as much as possible, but play seriously, pay attention to what you're doing, don't just shuffle pieces around, and try and play against people stronger than you are. Coaches are good, books are good, any kind of constant interaction with chess will make you improve, but mainly I think playing against people who are, let's say, one grade above you is excellent if you want to better yourself. Akramiton says, good morning, Peter. In the previous Q&A, you stated you do not actually intend to write a book. Most, if not all, members of Chess24 would consider that a waste, given your thorough understanding of the game, your sense of humor, and your erudition. Thanks for all that. I'm not sure all of it is correct. Question is, have you perchance changed your mind? Perhaps going 40 made you look upon publishing with a fonder eye? Well, not at the moment. I mean, I never... Have I actually ruled it out? I don't believe I said this was completely off the menu. But I still feel that there are better ways for me to spend my time currently. Although, yeah, I have been thinking more about diversifying from a purely, player's perspective on life to, doing more things. So it might happen, but not in the immediate future. Koenig's Murder says, hi Peter, my biggest problem is in all of my games is the time. In almost every game I reach a clearly better winning position. You are good, sir. I cannot say the same. But then lose in time trouble. It often happens that I only have 10 minutes left after 20 moves. I have this problem since I started playing chess, I guess, but I'm not able to solve it. Do you have any idea how I can get rid of it? We touched, I think, on that subject a little bit in the earlier questions, but I don't have a magical pill you can take that will suddenly make you play faster, but you can try taking a more practical approach to your chess. You can try and cut down on the amount of times, let's say, and once again, I have to take giant leaps of conjecture here because I don't really know why you're doing what you're doing, but if, let's say, you're very fond of checking and rechecking things you do, perhaps cut down on the rechecking. You need to calculate some things, obviously, over the course of the game. But perhaps you don't need to, you need to trust yourself more and play the move that feels right to you faster. But, I don't know, in my case, it happened naturally, and I don't really remember what I've done. As I said, I used to have a time travel problem, but it's not there anymore, and it seemed to just go away more or less on its own when I reached maybe 15. I don't have a surefire solution to that issue, and the thing is, for people who really have that issue, who are not just pretending that they have time travel problems, but do have them. It sometimes is very, very difficult to shake off. Just look at Grishuk. I know it's like a go-to reply whenever this question is mentioned. Nod at Sasha and say, look at him. It's not that easy, but it really isn't. So I don't know if I can make any sensible suggestions there. Stefan P999 says, have you read Dostoevsky's Notes from the Underground? I thought it might be in your style because of its double-edged kind of humor. I don't believe I've read that particular Dostoevsky book. I've read a lot of Dostoevsky, but not the entire canon. And I might get to it eventually, but my backlog is so huge of just the things, let's say, I ordered this year that are gathering dust on the shelves, that returning to the classics has been difficult recently. Goldfinger772, dear Peter, what would you recommend for a Grunfeld player to play against the London system or Trumpovsky? Thanks a lot. Okay, let's switch to the other view. So knight f6 against the London. I don't really know what to recommend exactly, because the London in particular seems to put such a, or at least that was always my understanding, it puts such a light emphasis on, you know, the actual outcome of the opening, that it would appear that it doesn't really matter a great deal what you do, you will get a playable position. So I don't have a definite solution about bishop f4, which is a bit weird, to be honest, because of the amount of people who play it these days. And but somehow against me, I think people still like to test me in the Grunfeld because they know what they're getting against me. As for the classical Trumpovsky, I've always played knight e4, and I always went for sort of the main lines there. And I don't know if the evaluation of these things changed. My personal preference always was for this somewhat quirky line, c5, f3, and just briefly before we return to this, there is bishop h4 here, but once again, unless something very, very drastic happened in the years I haven't looked at this, this was always considered to be perfectly fine for black. And it also gives black, you know, great chances for, you know, very sharp positions with winning prospects, which is excellent whenever you have a black game. So bishop f4, c5, f3, and here you play queen a5, check, c3, knight f6, and there are two moves for white here. One is d5, which I think currently is less popular, and the other one is knight d2. And after knight d2, I think there's a number of things you can do, but what I always like doing, and I don't know if I could actually recommend this because it is very risky, but it does lead to very interesting positions. Here probably queen b6 is the most practical solution, and black is, as far as I know, doing well there. But I always liked playing this move. The thing about queen f5 is that it more or less forces white to take on b8, rook take b8, white takes on d4 with the queen now, because otherwise black is just fine. And you play b6, e4, you play queen f4, and whenever this knight goes, and you don't see it, but the machine is currently screaming at me that black is losing. I'm not sure black is losing, actually. It always appealed to my sense of, you know, fun and adventure to be playing this position, because what you get is a kind of a Sicilian. In particular, it's very reminiscent of some, you know, Taimanov type positions, where black is currently very, very poorly developed. But if he does get his pieces out, his structure is very, very solid and very fluid. Yeah, that's a good sentence. I should pat myself on the head there. It's both solid and fluid. What I meant is there are no weaknesses, and it is actually rather fluid. You can play for f6 breaks later in the game. Even d6 breaks are not completely out of the question. The trick will be not to get immediately mated here. So let's rewind. Queen b6 is a lot saner version of the same thing. White normally takes with the queen. You play knight c6. There's a great deal of theory connected with this position, but as far as I can tell, current thinking is black is fine. But there's also this really quirky position which it might be fun to analyze for a bit. Although, as mentioned, the machine is very, very unimpressed about this, unsurprisingly, because your pieces are not really well developed with black here. But I played this in actual practical games, and it's not that bad. And it does appeal a great deal to my sense of adventure, but should probably come with a health warning. You know, very, very risky, obviously. As for the London system, as I said, in general, when I don't have a solution, I can tell you how I would approach it. If, let's say, I was told this evening that I need tomorrow to play against somebody like Kamsky, for instance, and I know I will get the London, I would make a small, I would make a search for games against the London played exclusively by and against strong players with both colors. And I would look at what people are doing, I would look at patterns, and I would settle on something that feels, natural and good to me. And what feels natural and good to me might not necessarily feel natural and good to you, but I would suggest you start by, there's no shortage of really, really high-level practice currently in the London. So look that up and try and find, a player who you can emulate there. A question from Mutineer. What do you think is better for improving your chess level? Trying to study looking at the screen or in front of a real chessboard? If you're working alone, you probably are better off working with the machine, because, the machine, when all is said and done, is such a tremendous tool. Everything you do is immediately saved, which is a huge big deal, because, notes get lost. And as someone when I started, I used to have notepads, thick notepads with all kinds of stuff, and these days, whatever you do, you can immediately save, and it's never gonna get lost. You keep a full log of all you're doing. But when you're working with friends or colleagues, or if you have a coach, then I think alternating between working with one or two computers and working over with a chessboard, studying, looking at the position live, so to speak, I think is very, very useful, because working with chess pieces and keeping the computer on the side does have its immediate advantages, because it unmuddles your thinking. It forces you to actually think on a somewhat deeper level about the questions the position is asking you. So I think both are fine, and for sessions where you have someone to look at chess with, I would recommend at least some of the time using the real chess set. Retep81, hello Peter, all great chess players started the game in their early childhood. Today many children are distracted by loads of information from the media, computer games, etc. Even some adult chess players love to play Pokemon Go for a noticeable amount of time, maybe you know of it. I haven't actually seen any chess players play Pokemon Go. I know a lot of chess players who play games of some description, but not Pokemon Go in particular. So that would be actually slightly surprising to me, considering what I know about chess players and their general life habits. Playing Pokemon Go involves going out of your room. That's abnormal behavior. Moving on. Do you think the highest level of chess could suffer because of that in the future? Will computer usage cause the opposite? Your opinion on distractions regarding children and also yourself. It is a problem, and I can see it, let's say, in my children. Attention spans do grow shorter. But on the other hand, children have access. Computers and games and all that are not only the distraction they undoubtedly are. They also are a source of tremendous amount of useful information. So I think it at the very least balances itself out. I don't think chess players of the future are dying out right now, and 10 years from now there will be no young and coming talent, because all of them will be playing whatever it is that they're playing. A question from Monfluster. What makes a good commentator in your opinion? I think a good commentator, in particular with chess, you do need to have not only a reasonable understanding of the game, but you also need to be able to break it down into manageable bits. You need to be, as with every other area of similar area, you need to be articulate. But with chess, I think liking and understanding the game, and both are important, because if you're not enjoying the subject you're talking about, it will probably come across and it will be noticeable in what you do, and being able to break it down into bits people can understand, because the thing about chess commentary and chess in general compared to other sports is that chess has a much higher entrance barrier, so to speak, for people who want to watch it, compared to the simpler sports, the sports that gather billions of viewers, because the rules are reasonably convoluted, and also explaining even the basic tactics to people who don't really play the game will be extremely hard. So you need to be able to convey concepts well, and you need to be able to switch between explaining long concrete variations which only specialists will understand, and explaining concepts which can be, as I already said, broken down and explained to hopefully every viewer. But I never really thought about this formally. This is the first time I tried to actually put it in words. It's just in my personal experience, it was just something I enjoyed a great deal. I became, if you can count me as a chess commentator, because every now and again I see some polls being done or some list being mentioned of best commentators of our time, which don't mention my name at all. So I guess it's a compliment to my chess playing skills that people think of me solely as a player. But if you do count me as a chess commentator, I mainly do it because I enjoy it, and that comes back to my original point. I still like chess a great deal. I like talking about chess. It's one of my favorite subjects, and I think it gets it's noticeable when I talk about chess that I enjoy it. Question from Alexander Potier. Hi Peter, what openings would you recommend that you do not need to learn too many lines by heart, so that allow you to focus more on principles and global plans? This is a hard question, because I think these days it's very, very hard to pick an opening where against strong opposition you will not be forced to know a great deal and to memorize a great deal. But as a general rule of thumb, quieter openings will probably require, they will put a lesser strain on your memory. So let's say if you're choosing between the King's Indian and the Nimzo, the King's Indian and the Queen's Gambit declined. The Nimzo and the Queen's Gambit declined will, although they still feature a ton of theory these days, but that perhaps is a bigger issue at the uppermost level. And at, let's say, club level, I don't know what level we're talking about here with you, but at club level, openings which put a bigger emphasis on positional play, and you can, I think, intuitively you will know what I'm talking about. Let's say Grunfeld and the King's Indian belong in one camp, and let's say Nimzo and the Bogo Indian and the Queen's Indian belong in the other camp. Of course, there will be incredibly sharp lines in the Queen's Indian as well occasionally, but generally, if you don't want to study too much theory, you should play openings in which price of a move is not that high, where you don't feel that a wrong move somewhere will just cost you the game outright, and that should be your guiding principle. A question from Klammer I almost actually missed, because it fills me with shame to answer it, but I haven't actually seen Radio Jan on the Singfield Cup, so I cannot say if he was right or not. Somebody told me he mentioned that I was only jet lagged because I was playing, and that was maybe the reference in the previous comment. Maybe that's why that was the wink wink nudge nudge in the previous question. I am not a Pokemon Go player myself. If the rumors I heard are correct, and my very slow start in the Singfield Cup was blamed by Radio Jan on on me spending entire nights searching for Pokemon, I have to regretfully say that this is not entirely true. Marcel Kirchia says, "Hello Peter, do you consider taking a break from chess? You seem to be worn out." I do feel a bit tired right now, but not from chess. There are things happening in my life apart from chess which do perhaps make me seem as if I could use a break. But chess is one of the very few things in my life right now which don't make me feel that way. Chess Chipmunk says, "Hello Peter, if you had to rob a bank along with a chess crew, who would you choose to drive the car, to block the door and to distract the crowd?" Not a lot of chess players drive. At least, let's say compared to the general population. I think the proportion of chess players who drive is lower compared to the same demographic sample of non-chess players. So here I can say I've driven as a passenger, and I firmly belong in the non-driving category myself. I never really. It's an interesting story which will not feature in this Q&A as to why exactly I don't drive. There is a very concrete story behind it which I'm not gonna tell here. But I've driven in some chess players' cars, and I think I will. Of the people I've driven in with, I will nominate, I think, Bareev to drive the Getaway car, and to block the door. This, in the current meta, so to speak, it immediately brings to mind the Hold the Door episode. So you need someone bulky. I hope Peter Heine will not take this as an insult. And to distract the crowd, I think Lev would be good at that. So it will be Lev who will be doing the everybody keep cool, it's a robbery, and PH on the door, and Yevgeny to drive. Carson02, what is your thought on GM Jordan Van Forest, who recently became, and I probably mispronounced that, right? Who became Dutch champions at just 17 years of age, and good luck in Moscow. Thanks for the wishes. I don't have a set opinion. I've never met the man. I think I played 2 or 3 games against him in Banters. He seems to be a very good player, judging by that, but that's not a particularly informative sample to use. But he's obviously a talented young player, and I wish him every success. But in order for me to have an opinion worth anything, I would have to either work with him or play a game against him and then analyze. This actually gives you a pretty decent idea, even after one game. If you can spend, let's say, an hour after the game analyzing with the person and listening to him talk about the game you just played, that gives you very, very good idea of how good he potentially can be. Analyzing with some people, I remember the first time I analyzed with Kasparov, for instance, it just blows your mind. The amount of things he sees, the depth to which he penetrates the position during the game. Question from Blue Car: which attributes does the Grandmaster, top Grandmaster, world champion needs to have other than strong will to improve himself? For instance, rationality. Yeah, that's a tough question. I recently gave a talk to a group of people in St. Petersburg. I was asked by our federation to do a little bit of talking in front of a mixed group featuring youngsters and mainly their parents, I think. And they also wanted to know what differentiates, let's say, a very, very top player against compared to, let's say, a 2600 player, 2500 player. And it's very, very small edges, and I think most of them are mental edges. Of course, experience and perhaps sadly for some people, natural talent will determine a great deal in how far you will go, as with most creative areas of human enterprise. But most of the difference will be in your mental attitude to the game, in your mental fortitude in general, in your desire to fight, and so on and so forth. So I think the biggest edge is psychological, and perhaps there's also a difference in, as mentioned, in natural talent. And another question from the same user, I'm not supposed to, but I will answer that. What rank are you at Hearthstone? I almost don't play constructed at all. I play like 97% of my Hearthstone traffic is arena. My win rate at arena is also not great, but it hovers around 5, which is not horrible, but really nothing to write home about either. I just before doing this show, I had a 12-win run with a shaman, which is always very gratifying. So I'm in a better frame of mind today. And immediately a question: what separates 2800s from 2750s by Mr. Normal Name? I just covered that. I think a lot of it is experience, and a lot of it is getting the practice in against the very best. So you could argue that definitely some of the 2650s, if they got an opportunity to play in the very top events from a reasonably early stage in their careers, they would become 2750s at least. But I think in particular, if you talk about the 2800s, it's psychological and mental strength, and also a great deal of natural talent. If you consider who actually broke that barrier in their career, those are the very, very best. Question from Spills, sorry. Hi, I'm 2200 and I want to become 1300. Yeah. Question: you seem rather gifted tactically. What sort of training did you do when you were young to develop that skill, or is it all just talent? And yeah, nice fake out there, Spills. Yeah, I seem to be struggling with that name today. I never really did any specific tactical training. I used to solve whatever came in front of me. For instance, I grew up in the years when the new issue of The Informant was the great big deal. You would in St. Petersburg, and we are a large city, so the whole city of St. Petersburg would get like maybe 50, and there was a specific shop in the center of town where you had to sort of apply beforehand, and the one would be allocated to you if you were early enough. And informants used to have tactical problems to solve at the back of them, and endgames problems to solve at the back of them, although those interested me less, which I think played a part in me being a better tactical player and a poor endgame player, and that still holds true even now when I'm 40. But I never really did any specific tactical training. I think in my case it is natural talent. I was just it was always the side of chess which appealed to me the most, and which was the easiest for me to get better at. Duke Crusher says, which elite players do you like to be paired against the most? That's a hard one. I don't think I have a single name I could choose which I would feel comfortable with that choice. Because even when I had a tremendously good score against Hikaru, which is no longer true, I never really felt like yeah, that's the game. I will do well, and give me that game, because I know that this is somebody I will crush. I would generally do quite well against him, but it never felt like this was easy points or free points. So perhaps we could approach this from a different angle. One player I really liked and still like playing, because I knew that a lot of our games in those years were reasonably brief draws, because especially when I was black, he would often just offer me a draw if he felt he didn't get anything out of the opening. But when we did get a full-blown game, most of our game were very, very interesting, and it was always a pleasure to play against him, and that player is Vasily Ivanchuk. I always felt that playing against Ivanchuk, it gives me an opportunity to perhaps express myself in ways that are you know, you don't always get that chance because he is such a creative player, a player with, you know, such a lot of imagination, and he also seemingly always welcomed this chance to play exactly the type of positions I like. We had a great number of games which were very, very sharp tactical fights, something which he is also obviously excellent at. So perhaps this will be a good answer to that question. Another question we can go to the board for. A question from Satirica. Let's go all the way back. My question refers to the Grunfeld defense. That's why I think you might be the one to ask. I have sympathy for the line where Harry the H-pawn is up for some action early on, which is in the main Grunfeld, knight of 3, bishop g7, and h4. In your video series and the ebook, you have some respect for this, and you regard it as dangerous, recommending 5c6. I actually even played 5c6 myself, yes. Among all other black for fifth move options, I could not find anything too convincing against the somehow standard or provocative castles. Feels slightly wrong, but both cd5, knight g5, h5, c5, and h5, knight takes h5, c takes d5, c6, as seen by games by Mamedjarov. The attack seems to fade reasonably quickly into more or less tamed equalish positions. What are your thoughts on long short castles, and how would you try to get something going against this line as white? I looked at castles, and it's not a bad choice at all. And first, I would like to say that if white plays bishop g5, although here you can probably deal with this somehow, but bishop g5, I think in many cases might force black to switch to the c6 lines anyway, because the pawn is now hanging, and with the pawn on h4, you know, your normal reply here is either well, bishop e4 basically, knight e4, since the bishop is already on g7. But here it's just not playable, because after cd5, knight g5 will take with the pawn, and black doesn't win the pawn back. So it will be either c6, which will transpose to the positions I discussed in the videos starting with 5c6, or you could maybe try taking on c4, and after e4 playing something like c5 or bishop g4, and this might lead to playable positions for black. But yeah, I think castles is definitely a very serious candidate here, and right now I can't remember exactly why I decided on a more solid option for the videos. Perhaps I just felt that it's c6 is definitely a safer bet. I think it's still fair to say that c6 leads to calmer and safer positions for black compared to castles. But castles, yeah, I have nothing immediately horrible to say about that move. It's very, very playable. Perhaps in the position after c takes d5, knight takes d5, h5, c5, you could make an argument that white is slightly better after takes bishop h6. But this is not horrible for black. It's it's quite playable. Question from Galactic, and we are an hour and 40 minutes in, and my scroll bar is barely to the barely gone half the page up. So I don't know how many of these I can handle before I start going completely crazy. My eyes are already somewhat glazed over, but I will soldier on for now. I think I can do another half an hour to an hour before I feel completely dead, and I apologize to those who may not get their question read out. Question from Galactic. I have a question about Fabiano. To my mind, he's potentially the clear number 2 in the world, even though the trend is not in his favor, and there are people further up in the thread, I've seen this, who picked up on the fact that the trend is spent. Yeah, people calling me on the phone when I'm doing this is not very helpful. Let me just briefly do something about it. Sorry about that. And it's my actual landline, which nobody calls me on the landline generally, and I muted the cell phone, and I thought I was safe, but you're never safe. I really don't understand this, and I don't know how to mute it either. Maybe I can switch it off somehow, but people just don't take the hint. Sorry about that. That's the perils of doing these things from home. Yeah, and the trend, which is not in Fabiano's favor currently, is spelled with a T on the end. So people have realized that, and there's already a comment in the thread somewhere about this being blasphemy, and of course Lawrence is in Fabiano's favor. Moving on. His chess is so principled. He has no style. His style is just playing the best moves. I feel that if he were a little bit more practical, managed his time better, and maybe chose openings more accurately, he'd be better than anyone except for Magnus. Since you have played against every current top player except one. That's weird. Who did I not play against? That's a weird statement. Maybe he means I haven't played much against Wesley, but I have played some games against Wesley. Do you share this feeling? I don't know if he is necessarily the the far and away clear number 2 in the world. I think MVL is coming into his own these days, and I'm sure both Hikaru and Wesley have their own deserved fan club. But I am a big fan of Fabiano's chess. I think he will be he already is tremendously strong, and if he doesn't at some point in his career play a world championship match, I'd be very, very surprised. But whether he's clearly better than everybody else apart from Magnus, that is a very strong statement. I'm not sure if I agree with it wholeheartedly, but I do think, let's put it like this. It's a statement I don't disagree with immediately, which is already saying quite a lot. A question from Kitvir. Hello, who do you think will win the cricket series between India and New Zealand, and why? Depends on where it's held. I've not really studied the Future Tours program as deeply as all that. I mean, if it's in India, you probably take India. If it's in New Zealand, it's less clear. I like New Zealanders' attack a great deal, and also they have arguably one of the top 2 or 3 players, batsmen in the world right now, in Kane Williamson, and some other very strong batsmen as well. So I think home advantage will be probably insurmountable if they play in India. But in New Zealand, I would maybe think the Kiwis are, and we're talking tests. I don't really know about current one-day form. In tests, I would bet on the hosts, regardless of who the hosts are. Question by Daffy Duck. Hi Peter, I have a question about training. How did you train at home without trainer when you were a child? Those periods weren't very, very long, to be honest. I started working, I started going to the Pioneers House in my local district, and I worked there with a coach who sort of singled me out because I was a reasonably gifted child very early on, and we had personal sessions and all that. And then when we drifted apart, there was a period when I was on my own for about maybe a year and a half, and then I got picked up by Andrei Lukin, who I personally think is the single biggest reason for my chess successes, because the amount of things he taught me, and the discipline and the structure he gave me are absolutely priceless. But in that period where I had no coach, there was the period when there were no computers, there were still books. So I would read books, I would read magazines, and somewhere in that period I actually managed to restructure my opening repertoire on my own from playing some really non-principled and not particularly good systems in 1d4. I used to play the Colley, not even the London. I used to play the Meran with colors reversed, basically, against everything. And I started playing 1e4, and I taught myself 1e4 more or less on my own by, looking at games, making... Those were the years where you actually made cuttings out of magazines, and you created like these collections of games which were cut out of magazines. I used to have those. Fun times. And I taught myself to play first the Gioco Piano because it was easier, because you don't tackle the Spanish. The Spanish is a huge beast, and I started off by including the Gioco Piano, and then I gravitated slowly towards the Spanish and started playing the Spanish. And at some point I no longer played 1d4 at all, and I had to relearn 1d4 at a much older age. But yeah, in those years, my experiences are not really applicable anymore. Because these days, if you're alone, it doesn't really mean you're in much trouble in terms of training, because you have access to all this, tremendous wealth of information. And it shouldn't really... It just depends on whether you actually want to work or not. There are so many ways of doing it on your own these days that weren't really available to me. A question from Sanat Singhal. Hi Peter, my rating is around 1900 USCF, and I don't really have any prep against the Spanish, so I started to watch your video series on the D3 Spanish, but it seemed too advanced and kind of deep for me. I felt the same way for many opening video series on Chess24. I feel they analyzed a lot of sidelines and lines way too deeply than I need to know. How do you recommend studying your vids and other vids on Chess24 to cut down the amount of lines and to actually understand and memorize the opening? And what's your advice on studying openings in general? That's a complaint that... It wasn't phrased as a complaint, I don't really mean that, but that's something that I thought about it because obviously I would like my material to appeal and to be useful to the widest possible group of players, but I do feel that my videos and perhaps many of the premium stuff on Chess24, they are aimed at a slightly higher level of players, and yes, it might feel clunky and it might discourage players of Sanat's level, but I still feel that whenever possible, in particular in my Spanish series, or at least that was my intention, and if I did not succeed, I should probably apologize. It was definitely my intention to also cover the underlying ideas and not just give you a sort of rattle off long series of forced moves and say, here you do this, this, and this, and the result is the position is better for white, equal, better for black, whatever the answer is. I always try and cover the underlying ideology of the opening, so to speak. But if it doesn't really come across as well as I'd hoped, I'm sorry, and I don't know what to suggest in terms of studying the videos of Chess24, because they are what they are. It's very difficult for me to do something with at least the ones I've already recorded. The best way to work on openings in general for me, I always start by creating a database of everything that has been played in the opening, and then you try to identify sort of critical directions the opening might go, and in those I always start by looking at games by top players, because those give you the fastest idea, the fastest I think you can get the grasp of the opening the easiest by studying current top players in particular, because they have all of them studied whatever they play very, very deeply. So you create a database, and then once let's say you realize that there is a set of positions after around, let's say, move 10, there will be a number of those which are the most likely to occur in that opening, And for every single position like that, you can make a selection of, let's say, 15 games, preferably actually current games, because theory, it's not just that it will be more sort of mathematically correct, but also if you sort by rating, current high-rated players have worked on openings, I think, in general, a lot more than, and they have access to a lot more theory already than top players of yesteryear. So you make that selection, and you look at what they do, and you try to draw some conclusions from that. Question from Filipino. Hi Peter, do you think the 7 Queen F3 line in the Taimanov is decent? If not, can you recommend another line for white against the Taimanov? I think Queen F3 is very, very decent, yes. It probably requires some work because there are some very, very sharp tactical lines there which needs to be studied. But I think it's very, very playable, and I personally don't particularly like what I am doing against it. I played not a lot of games against that line, but the line I tried there doesn't convince me as being completely equal. So Queen F3 is good. If you need another line, I don't think the main lines after Queen D2 have been refuted. So you can definitely still play Queen D2, long castle, and aim for the English attack type structures. Kalashnikov asks, hey Peter, is the Grunfeld update still on your to-do list? Maybe you can give us a hint which lines of the Grunfeld are a good way for white to get a game with a reasonable, interesting position. Is the bishop d2 line okay for this purpose, or are your recommendations again against your idea with f4 bulletproof? It's definitely still on my to-do list. It's been somewhat postponed because life sort of intervened, and I was planning to spend parts of September at least in Hamburg recording stuff, but plans had to be changed. But yeah, I will definitely do it at some point. I think it's important for me to update that material. I don't think videos are unusable by now, but there are definitely points where remarks need to be made about the advances theory has made since. And if you want a lively position with a lot of play, I think 3f3 is far and away the best way to get a sharp position where nothing is exhausted as yet. You will need to work a lot on that because the positions after Queen d6, which I discussed earlier, early in the show, if you start looking at this, just to bring this up again, if you start looking at this from the white side, it will be a bit easier for you from the white side because you actually only need to choose one move in this position, and you don't need to bother yourself with the other four, which are also very, very playable. But it does require a tremendous amount of work here because there's lots and lots of permutations. But I think this is very promising for white. I don't think this refutes the Grunfeld, but f3 is probably the best way to get a fresh playable position. If not, bishop d2 is playable. Bishop e3 is currently undergoing a little bit of a, I think, lull in white's success, if you can phrase it this way. But it depends on what you like. If you like long forcing lines, you could try and revive rook b1. Rook b1 is not entirely dead. If you look, for instance, at the position Nisipiano got against Maxime Vaskela-Grave in Dortmund, I think, not every single black player will enjoy playing something like this. But generally, if I needed to recommend just one line, I think it would be 3f3. Question from Summerbird. Hi Peter, in team competitions, for instance Olympiad, is there any interaction or communication going on or allowed during the game between the teammates or between team members and the team captain? For example, team captain advises the board 2 player to go for a win to compensate a battle loss position on board 3. Question continues, but I can stop it here and answer this. The captain is present, but he can only speak to the members of the team in the presence of the arbiter. And I think the current rules, I am not an arbiter, but I think currently you are only allowed to ask your captain when you have been offered a draw. You cannot ask your captain if you can offer a draw yourself. This is a decision you need to make yourself. And you can come to your captain in the presence of the arbiter and ask your captain in a language the arbiter will understand, I think in a yes or no form pretty much, if you should take the draw. Any other form of communication between the captain and the player is forbidden, and this is how it should be. And all the tactical decisions concerning the way the match is standing right now, and whether you should go for a sharper position, whether you should simplify and make a draw, all of those decisions are taken by players themselves, which once again I think is how it should be. Bill 1226, Peter, thanks for all you do to help us non-professionals. I'm a 19 plus older player in my 50s, and I'm looking for a slightly more solid alternative to my King's Indian as black, but still retaining interesting play and winning chances. I'm leading towards either the Slav Semislav or the Nimzo Bogo. Which would you advise and why? If you want interesting play and winning chances, it's hard to say, because I mean the Slav does allow white to go for, you know, very dry positions, but so does the Nimzo Bogo. I think it still is the Nimzo Bogo, because if you play the Slav, some of the people you will be playing against will just take on d5, move 3, and not only is it somewhat boring, you're also not guaranteed to equalize. I actually played this as a very serious way to fight for advantage as white. That was my, you know, very much part of my preparation when I switched over to 1d4 for London and Hunte. Against the Slav, I was very much planning to take on d5 and play the exchange Slav for a win, and I won an important game against Lee Kwang Liam in one of the World Cups in that line. So I guess if the choice is formulated like this, it has to be the Nimzo and the Bogo. Or the Nimzo and the Queen's Indian, actually. You don't need to play the Bogo. I think the Queen's Indian will give you better chances if you want interesting play. Passion, who is a grandmaster from Australia, Max Illingworth, is asking, hi Peter, what non-chess activities would you recommend as ways to improve your chess performance, either in the long term or just for one game? Everyone knows the importance of exercise fitness. I'm seeking some further ideas. First of all, I don't think everyone knows, or at least everyone knows, but not everyone implements exercise and fitness, and more people should, because that might be the 2, 5, or even 10% you might desperately need at some point. That have been lacking because you are easily tired, for instance. It also applies to me, obviously. But I don't know what I can recommend. I mean, I do a lot of things in my spare time, which I would feel difficult to give up on, but which are not at all necessarily good for me and for my chess. I think I've had some conversations with people who felt, for instance, and it will sound a bit weird coming from me because I have no experience with it, but also it kind of falls under the exercise fitness umbrella, but not entirely. I've heard many people say that if you could teach yourself the basics of meditation, it would be extremely beneficial for all kinds of human activity, including chess, because it would allow you to concentrate better. It would allow you to become a lot better at driving away distractions and all that. So if that doesn't sound too wacky to you, and if you don't just dismiss the suggestion simply because you feel that it doesn't exist, which I guess some people do, although I don't really belong in that group, you could maybe consider doing that. I have spoken on this subject with people I consider to be very, very smart, and also people who are not into they are perfectly rational, people who are not necessarily drawn to mysticism or anything of that nature, but they do feel that it does improve your general outlook on life and could be useful. Not something I have experience with personally. Far Away from Hell asks, what are your plans after the Tal Memorial? Will you commentate on the match between Carlsen and Karakin? What do you think about Agon and their politics about broadcasting rights? I will play at least 2 more tournaments after, more or less immediately after the Tal Memorial. I'll play the Super Final and then the European Club Cup. As for the match, I haven't heard anything from the Agon people, so I would assume I'm not involved in commentary from New York. I might do something for Chess24. This depends, obviously, in part at least, on the other half of that question. I spoke on the subject quite seriously to the Agon people in Moscow. I thought they made a mistake in their stance on the subject of rights. I thought it was very counterproductive to do what they did, but I also felt they were very, very sincere, and they were not doing it just to be contrary and to, make sure that life is uncomfortable for their direct competition, so to speak. They were very, very passionate about the idea that having only one broadcaster will bring in advertisers and serious companies which will otherwise not at all be interested in getting involved with chess, because in other sports you do have exclusive broadcasting rights, and it's a huge big deal to serious corporate sponsorship. So I think the end result, I feel, was incorrect. I think the whole brouhaha during the candidates was counterproductive and didn't really win them any points. But also, I definitely I think they did it from a a correct original standpoint of trying to do something good for chess, not just it wasn't done out of malice. And as I don't have any hard data on this, but once again, if I'm not mistaken, from my conversations in Moscow with the Agon people, it probably will not be the case in New York, because they don't want once again, they don't need the repetition of what happened in Moscow. I think that should probably cover it. As for my work on the World Championship match, currently I don't really know. Question from Stenson Yonergard. My friend and I are interested in Soviet Russian music, particularly from the 80s to the present, and we were wondering about what Russian music you listen to. And then there are some names which will probably confuse most people, so I won't try to pronounce them on the show. But since Stenson seems to know what he's talking about, I was always I was the aquarium guy. I listened to and still listen to quite a lot of aquarium, almost to the exclusion of everything else. Aquarium and Zoopark. Those were the two bands that I listened to. Perhaps unsurprisingly, both of those two bands drew very, very heavily in their work. They were both very lyric heavy, which is something that appeals to me a great deal. And they both feature a great deal of, sometimes even direct deal and translations in both Grebenshchikov and Naumenko's songs. There's a great deal of Dylan influence, and for me, as a lifelong Dylan fan, this was always very, very appealing. Okay, let me just briefly see how much scrolling do I have to do to get to the top, and then we'll try and ration it properly, because I do feel like I'm becoming a bit zombified here. Whoa. Yeah, there's no way I can get through all of that. And since I decided at some point not to make a list and not to pick and choose and find good questions and ignore the rest, I don't know how to approach this properly. Question from Gamoral. Dear Peter, do you have any difficult opponents that regularly seem to cause you more trouble than your relative strength would suggest? If so, how does one address this problem? I famously have a horrible score against Anand and a bad score against Kramnik. My score against Kramnik is a bit better than my score against Anand, and actually against Kramnik at some point I went on a bit of a spree and won like 3 games in a reasonably short period of time and lost maybe none or one. But my original score against Kramnik for many years was quite bad. And also I have surprisingly good scores against people you wouldn't necessarily figure from my clients, so to speak. I still have a very good score against Hikaru. I have a decent score against Magnus, although we obviously don't play as much these days. I'm not sure you can do much about this. Winning one game somewhere against somebody you've never beaten, if you actually win one game somewhere somehow, it immediately improves your future encounters with that person. For instance, once Hikaru has beaten me once, he immediately won a very nice miniature against me with black in the next tournament that we played in, I think. Once he got that monkey off his back, so to speak. So all you can do is try to play your best and solve it by breaking the chain of events, and then you feel a lot better. Question from Chess Analyst. Let's go to the board for a second. Maybe this is more of an opening clinic question, but what do you think is the best plan for white in the Noteboom Slav? I'm not a huge specialist, but let's show what we're talking about here. This is the Noteboom variation. It's one of the sharpest ways for black to play in all of the let's say Slav, semi-Slav family of openings. But the thing about the Noteboom, apart from the fact that, as mentioned, I haven't really studied it properly, and my opinion doesn't really carry much weight here, I feel. Some people who have studied it told me that the current thinking is that this is almost winning for white, I think, and with precise play, I think the current plan is very much connected with the idea of playing bishop c2, bishop a4, and stopping the avalanche first, and then you slowly improve the position of your pieces, and eventually your center just becomes overpowers black, so to speak. But once again, this is not an opening I ever actually needed to analyze from the white side. So what I have is some conversations with people who know. And the last time I discussed this with people, it was suggested to me that at the very top level, this opening is a bluff, basically, by black. Because against somebody who really knows what he's doing, this is probably incorrect from a mathematical standpoint. But I cannot really tell you exactly why. Jersey Dave says, tell us about your family. Where and when did you meet your wife? Did your kids play chess? Do your kids play chess? And what about my wife? And does she share my peculiar sports interests? I met my wife when we were about 10. She is probably the of my circle of friends, acquaintances, and relatives. She is the only person who was able to tell Boris Gelfand when she met him that she knows him longer than he does. he was always very proud. Whenever he met, some of my family in particular, he was always very proud to tell them that he probably knows me longer than they do. But with her, this didn't really work because we've met when we were 10. We went to the same school. My kids, I mean, it becomes a bit non-linear after that, and we won't get into the whole story. It will take another hour to explain. It's not the usual, boy meets girl and then marries his, school sweetheart at 18. It's not that kind of a story, but we did meet when we were 10. And my kids don't play chess. One of my boys plays piano. He also used to draw, but no longer does that seriously, which is very regrettable. And the other one is developing in directions which are, frankly, currently a little bit frightening, and I will not mention them. But they are nice non-chess playing children. Olga learned to use the engine, to my chagrin. Not necessarily chagrin, but when you come back you come back to your room after the game and your wife says, but you had +4. It's not a nice feeling, but it was, I guess, unavoidable, with the proliferation of websites which give you instant access to computer evaluations. But she doesn't play chess, and we've been to live cricket matches together, but she doesn't really enjoy it to the extent that I do. But she wasn't given much choice. And I am now scrolling over some questions because I would like to. I feel a bit worn out by this, and I would like to find some stuff that I feel I have something interesting to say about, and not just go through every single one, because time is a little bit limited. A question from Aaron Lafferty. I was curious what type of games, what your favorite types of games to watch are. Are they the crazy attacking games, or positional squeezes, or something else entirely? And for bonus points, are they the same type of games you're most proud of when you play them yourself? I think if you use the word proud, these days when I play, it doesn't happen very often, but when I do play a reasonably clean technical game, I feel, I think, the most pride, because it was something I really couldn't do at any kind of high level when I was coming up as a chess player, let's put it like this. But the games I enjoy playing the most are still the sharp tactical fights, even though I know that most likely I will come back to the room and the machine will tell me that I played like a beginner, and my opponent was also not all that mistake free. And those are the games I like watching the most, I think. The huge messes where you can try and anticipate what will happen, you can try and calculate together with the players your way out of a hugely complicated position. A question from Wheelroll I sort of addressed early in the show. Have you ever analyzed with someone whose insights just blew you away, like you were getting a glimpse into a chess mind of another order altogether? You do get that impression with the really, really strong players, and in particular, I think Kasparov comes to mind. But also, I think of let's say, the current and the top 10 over the past couple of decades. There are very few people in there who, on occasion, will not just completely shock you by how much and how well they understand the game and how much they see during the game. So, complete order of chess mind of a complete, altogether different order is maybe strong. I generally go in entirely the opposite direction, but I have to say I'm I'm not that bad of a chess player, so maybe not a completely different order, but yeah, Kasparov is fantastic. Analyzing with Kramnik will teach you more about chess than I mean, 1 hour of analysis with Kramnik in a good mood will teach you more about chess than maybe a week of looking at the same position yourself, and so on and so forth. Question from Brooklyn Gambit. It's long, so I'll get to the meat of the question, so to speak. All-time Russian Olympiad team, top 4 players and the reserve. You have to pick Kasparov. I don't. I mean, I will start by saying Kasparov, and then I will start thinking. Kasparov results for the team were nothing short of stunning. And perhaps it's not surprising that the last Olympiad the Russian team won was the last one Kasparov played in Bled 02. But it's not the only reason. It's also that the competition just grew stronger and stronger, and it's not just the the magical properties of Kasparov on the team, obviously. So it's Kasparov. Of the people I played with, because it's very hard for me to judge, because if you take all time, you probably will go with I don't know, Kasparov, Karpov, Kramnik, I guess, and then I would need to study, because some of it's like I don't know, picking like 20th century best 11 out of all the. I don't know if Brooklyn Gambit is probably not a cricket fan, so he will probably not know what I'm talking about. But any kind of a world 11, or even let's say all-time England 11, is every now and again somebody to sell some books will produce a book with a very well thought out argument on what his England 11 is, and it's completely arbitrary, and somebody else will pick not the 11 different others, but some picks will be very contentious. So, I mean, how do you pick between, I don't know, let's say Petrosian or Spassky or somebody, and some of it has to come down to statistics, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, and I did not do any research on this. Statistics are available, but I'm not really aware of them. Of the people I played with, his later results became a bit unstable, but in the early years, it was fantastic to have Alexander Morozevich on the team, because he would just absolutely destroy lower boards with either color. And that was, a player like that is tremendously useful for the team, because you just know that he really terrorized people he was playing against. You could see that the somewhat weaker players he was playing against, let's say on board 4 in an Olympic team, they were in absolute terror of him, with regardless of what color they were playing, and he would just destroy them. So that's a very useful quality. But yeah, I don't know. It's Kasparov. It's definitely Kramnik for lifetime achievement award, so to speak. Especially if you only consider the modern players. I mean, his result in this Olympiad is fantastic, but if you go back in 1992, when he first played for the Russian team in Manila, he scored 8.5 out of 9. He was 15 at the time, maybe 16. So he's been a fantastic servant, if you can use that word, for the Russian chess over the last 2 decades. But yeah, it's hard to pick 4. It's just the list is too long. A list of my favorite famous people, Ali H9999. Might run Christopher Hitchens, Peter Svidler. I really do not belong on these lists, sorry guys. Further Holtz. Do you have knowledge of either number 1, 3? I read some Hitchens, although not a lot, and I definitely know of Fedor, although I don't know him personally. I have railed the final table of 102K he just won. Boy, does he run well. I mean, he's a fantastic player, but boy, does he run well. It's just disgusting how well he runs. But yeah, it's a weird list you have there, and I don't know what I'm doing on it. Who would you have on your list? Favorite famous people. I'm really, really bad with lists, to be honest. I don't know. Names that came to mind immediately, so let's just stick with those, were Michael Atherton and Tim Minchin. I don't know why those two. It makes no sense even to myself, but that's the two names I will go with. What is the finest chess club in Russia by Puzzled Pawn, and how does it compare to the St. Louis Chess Club? Finest in terms of architecture or in terms of what's going on inside? Both St. Petersburg and Moscow have very, very nice central chess clubs, so to speak, located in the center of the city, you know, in nice buildings and everything. But in terms of what's going on inside, I think SLCC currently is ahead of everyone. To my frankly regret and envy, because you know, the chess traditions in Russia have always been something we were all intensely proud of. But I think, and Kasparov, he came this year and he gave a number of speeches, and in one of the speeches he said that the spirit of Soviet chess, the spirit that for him in particular feels like home, is very much alive right now in St. Louis, and I do agree with that. They have a, I don't want to harp on, but the chess atmosphere I've encountered in St. Louis this year was, it absolutely stunned me. It was something I haven't experienced in a very, very long time, maybe never. Yeah, finally the question about Wesley, but it's good that I addressed it earlier on a different subject altogether, because it's not from a premium member, so I wouldn't have been able to touch it anyway. A question from Ted Lawyer on why we haven't won the Olympiad since Bled. Nobody knows why. I'm sorry, I don't have the answer either. I mean, I know why generally we're not as big of a favorite anymore. It's to do with the fact that teams have just generally become much stronger. Chess is once again, due to reasons I don't really feel confident naming, chess is enjoying a lot of resurgence in the West. It's becoming a lot more popular in the West, but it's not a modern phenomenon, because then we would see the results in 15 years time. But we do see, let's say, the US has a very strong team now. You can say that some of the talent is imported, but still there was a shift from, let's say, the Soviet emigres to the kids who have, in Fabiano's case, have definite US roots and so on and so forth. But also, hugely importantly, the breakup of the Soviet Union created a number of very strong teams. So, Ukraine won, I think, 2 Olympiads and finished second in this one. Armenia won a number of Olympiads. Those teams would not exist and would send their best players. Not only would they not exist before 1992, they would also send their best players to become part of the Soviet team. So it's simply a completely different landscape. But it still doesn't explain why the team, which is always on paper ranked number 1, has not won an Olympiad since '02. And I do not have an answer. If anything, I may be part of the problem, but not part of the answer or solution. Since it is almost 2 hours and a half, I am now aggressively scrolling through the list to find questions I feel like talking about, because I do feel like I'm reaching the end of my rope here a little bit. Back to the subject of books. A question from Croissantist. Hi Peter, great to see you active on Chess24. I currently have an opening book by Yvonne and Isai Rosenfeld published in '62. Obviously the theory might be a little outdated, but generally the main variations and everything should hold. So my question is, to what degree one can trust opening theory book from the 60s, 70s and 80s nowadays? Are they more to be looked out of purely historic interest, or do you think they're still worthy studying material? And here I can answer with a personal story which is very, very recent. I mentioned during one of the shows this week that to my right there, you can't see it, and I won't try and turn the camera because it's dark in the room apart from the light above my head. I have this kind of a small table which was completely full to overflowing with books that I, mainly ordered off Amazon and was still to read, and it was annoying Olga a great deal. So in order to find space for them, I started looking through shelves and looking for stuff I could maybe give away, because I, every year or so, I go through my book collection and sort of purge it of books I have read and I'm not planning to reread, and I'm not planning to try and force on my children. Those are the two criteria. Mainly the second one actually, because I these days when I buy books, I buy them with half an eye on whether I feel this will be interesting for my kids, because they both read English pretty much with the same ease as they read Russian these days, which is very gratifying for me. One thing we definitely did well as parents is they will not have any issues with languages, or at least one language. And I found a whole shelf filled with Yugoslav encyclopedias, the A through E encyclopedias, if you know what I mean, the old informant type books, filled to overflowing with theory written by in many cases best theoretical minds of that time. And I tried finding people who would take them for free, and some of them are old, but the encyclopedias in particular are pretty much in mint condition. And I found that basically it's more or less impossible to even to find people who will be willing to even take them off my hands for no money at all, because life kind of moved on. I think books on classics, biographies with games annotated by people who cared about their subjects, those books are still very much valid and still can do a lot for you. But purely theoretical books from even the 80s, let alone the 60s, they have rarity value. They don't really have theoretical value anymore. And even the statement there, the main variations and everything should hold, I think that statement is hugely optimistic. I think if you actually started checking, things would not hold. So no, I think all theory books are not really very useful anymore. Question from Anorak82. Why are Blitz events like the ones recently played in the Grand Chess Tour are not played on a computer interface? Playing it over the board seems so sloppy, with pieces being knocked over, and the game's hard to follow for the commentators waiting for the DGT boards to catch up to live play. Would mouse slips and lag be too much of an issue? From a broadcasting point of view, it seems having the games played online would be more seamless. I actually saw this question when I was preparing for the show, and I was about to, not ridicule it as such, but I was about to say that this is, because I misunderstood it. I thought maybe he meant playing those events from home, and that would bring, immediate problems, because you want transparency when people are playing from home. It's you basically need to have, even for Blitz, you feel webcams are the least sort of threshold, the lowest threshold there for security measures, because you want to make sure people are playing on their own. But if, and once again I seem to have lost the connection, so apologies if this part gets lost, but looks like it's back up. Hang on a sec. I will just check. Let's proceed under the assumption that the stream is back up. If on the other hand, what Anarak82 meant was that you just give people two machines that stand in front of each other and they play online. In terms of broadcasting, this idea actually, I think, has definite merit, because games will, moves will not get lost. You will not have, indeed, all the issues with people falling down, with pieces falling down and people having to correct them on their own time, and all the, castling with two hands issues and all the rest of that, which is completely unnecessary and extraneous to the game of chess. But it would require some, technical adjustments, and I would be very interested to actually, next time I'm in the same room with chess organizers, with progressive, forward-thinking chess organizers, I actually, if I remember, I would very much like to ask them why this is not done, because it doesn't sound like an insurmountable technical issue, and it would improve many aspects of the broadcasting for sure. Really feel like I should maybe do 2 or 3 more and call it quits, because I feel completely fried here. Question from Geppo. Dear Peter, many amateurs want to play a game where opening theory is not of the utmost importance. One way of getting away from the theory-laden variations is the modern defense. And since you have some, or maybe a little bit more than some, experience in the modern, would you be so kind to comment if that opening is suitable for non-professionals? Or is it strategically too risky and therefore not easy to play at below master level? I think it's one of the better openings to play at that level, because it leads to very lively positions. You will need to, it's not an easy opening to play by any stretch, but if you don't run the risk of getting severely punished by people who know the most dangerous move orders, I think the modern is definitely a very, very good and interesting choice at club level. It does become a bit problematic at higher levels, because frankly, against reasonably well prepared strong players, I had to more or less completely give up on it, because I just stopped liking the positions I kept getting. But at club level, sure. Question by Kaiso. In order to estimate the influence of knowledge in chess, I also asked this question of other strong players. During your professional career, what is the average number of moves that are prepared? So after how many moves you are in average out of book? That very much depends on the opening. In some openings, work sort of starts after move 20. In some openings, you can be sort of on your own by move 10. But average number has to be, between 15 and 18, I guess. What was your preparation record? Largest number of prepared moves in one game? I think I had a game against Grishuk in Mexico where I knew, and in particular, it was, it's a notable example because it was such an important tournament. It was a candidates tournament in Mexico City. There was a game there where I was still in book by mid-20s. I'm not sure if that was ever better than my games. Maybe in some games I got up to 30, but I don't remember them off the top of my head. And what's the worst preparation experience? Smallest number until you were out of book. Pretty sure I've been out of book by move 5 or 6 more than once in my life, maybe even earlier. It depends on what you play as well. I think there was a recent game I played in one of the super finals against Morozevich where I played some knight of 3 line and he replied to it by some really weird early b5. and I had to start thinking from definitely at least move 4, maybe 5, but maybe even 4. So that very, very much depends on also what you were trying to achieve, because if you are going for a mainstream opening, then it's very, very rare to encounter novelties earlier than, let's say, move 12 or 13. But in offbeat stuff, you can be completely on your own very early. Question from Dr. Boki. Do you have a daily routine checking the latest games? Do you concentrate only on games played at the highest level? Or do you also check games by players, let's say 2500 ELO? I used to, Chess Professional's life, and I think this still kind of holds true, revolves around the weekly databases put out by Mark Krauser on the Week in Chess. And I used to actually look through the entire Week in Chess, sort of almost entirely ignoring the weaker tournaments, but going through at very, very high speed, of course, not in depth, but going through more or less every single game played in tournaments where strong players played. I no longer do that for reasons of time, I guess, and also energy. And these days, but I do watch, most of the interesting events I watch live. I have the tab open, and I will keep returning to it over the course of the day. So the tournaments I'm actually interested in, I will have seen most of the games from them as they were unfolding. And if a tournament is being broadcast live, I will look at, let's say, the top 15 boards, so I don't only follow the very top players. Trying to find something I can actually comment on. There's a question I actually probably have some thoughts on, but it's such depressing subject matter. Question from Koval. What do you think is the better anti-Berlin opening, the Scotch, the Italian, or Vienna? Which gives more chances for an advantage in your opinion? And why is the Italian popular the most popular of them at the GM level? Is it really that different from the 4G3 anti-Berlin? I think the Italian currently is probably the best choice, simply because it hasn't really been worked out yet. Objectively, I think the Scotch is the most ambitious, and my choice would be the Scotch. But the Scotch, due to the efforts of Kasparov and others, became a very serious mainstream opening at some point. So Black actually took time and worked out what to do. And against a well-prepared opponent, you will struggle to get anywhere in the Scotch these days. And the Italian in particular, this sort of newfangled Italian with a pawn on a4, and then a variety of plans to follow it up with, it leads to positions which, although probably not better for white objectively, they are reasonably fresh. And the comparison with the 4G3 Berlin, I think you probably can make an argument that it's like half a tempo ahead of the 4D3 Berlin, because since you're not really taking on c6 there these days, at least the comparison probably is with the slower d3 c3 systems. The fact that your bishop is already on c4 and not on b5 is, I guess, in white's favor a little bit. Question from Chess Ceres. Hi Peter, Nigel Short calls anti-cheating rules checking for electronic devices during the game anti-chess. What do you think about it? I wasn't there during the Olympiad, so I've had no direct experience with it. And some people came out in favor of it. Notably, Gatakamsky wrote up a number of Facebook posts, I think, saying that this has been long in coming and he welcomes it. And I think his original post was sort of even harsher, and he was arguing for completely disallowing visits to the bathroom for the first 2 hours of the game to discourage people. I think, as he put it, I'm paraphrasing here. This is not a direct quote, but I'm pretty sure of my memory here. He said that it's too often that whenever a person reaches an important and critical opening position that he immediately runs off from the board, and this has to be stopped, and there's absolutely no reason for people to leave the board for the first 2 hours of the game. I think that's more than a little draconian. I would definitely disagree with that. And I also think that however well-intentioned this new feeder rule is, what it achieves mostly is it gives arbiters additional powers. And I'm not sure how controversial this is, and I feel kind of stupid, and I feel like I need to preface this by saying, some of my best friends are arbiters, but if you know what I mean. But in my experience, this recent trend to giving arbiters more and more discretionary power over players is not a good trend. It's not the trend I like, and I can tell from personal experience that I think it started. I think they introduced the zero tolerance rule for the first time during the Dresden Olympiad in 2008, and I had a personal experience during that, and maybe let me just briefly. Yeah, I'm almost at the top there, so we can maybe get close to wrapping up by doing this one and maybe one other question. I want to tell you this personal story because it's a kind of a funny story, and it also it's a continuation of an answer to an earlier question. There was a number of really egregious, I don't know if I'm using that word correctly, stories about arbiters abusing their newfangled powers during the Dresden Olympiad with I think Kostenyuk made a draw with somebody in 25 moves in that Olympiad, and that was also the Olympiad where they introduced the no draws before move 30 rule. And that game was finished by a threefold repetition, actually a perpetual check after a number of sacrifices, I think. So there was absolutely nothing wrong with that draw. And the arbiters, I think, threatened to make the result 0-0, and I think they brought the players back and forced them to play out the game, and there was some unbelievable stupidity on display there. But in my personal experience, it was noticeable that once the arbiters were given those discretionary powers to pressure the players, also just flat out weird things started happening. And I remember we were playing Ukraine, and I played Karyakin with black on board 2, I believe. And there was he was still playing against us in those years, and I was slightly worse for the whole game. And then after the time control, I felt I equalized, and either Sergei offered me a draw, or maybe I wanted to offer a draw myself. And to do that, I felt I needed to check how the match was progressing. And in Dresden Olympiad, tables were not 4 in a row in a match. You had 2 tables, boards 1 and 2 were next to each other, and boards 3 and 4 were sort of behind our back. So I got up from my chair, and I stood 50 centimeters from my board, and I turned around to have a look at boards 3 and 4, because board 1, where Kramnik was playing Ivanchuk, I could see. And at that point, and I was standing up in full view, 50 centimeters from the board, not talking to anybody, not making eye contact with anybody, and not leaving the playing area in any way, shape, or form. Just looking at how the rest of my match was progressing. And at that point, the arbiter, which was working at our match, came up to me and said, "Sit down." Not sort of sit down, but like in this tone of voice, he told me, "Sit down." I looked at him, and this was I started playing Olympiads in 94. By 2008, I sort of knew my rights. And this was a bit of a stunning development for me. I looked at him and I said, "What?" And he told me, "Sit down now." And I tried explaining to him that I'm not really breaking any rules, but it's weird. And the more powers arbiters have, the less it becomes, the conditions worsen for players. And I'm definitely in the players' corner on this. And from what I've read and heard about the recent rules, it's the continuation of the same trend. And I think Nigel is correct. Although, in defense of the current regulations, you have to mention that they actually, I think, caught one player by doing those checks during games. And the result of one game was actually reversed, because they caught a player with not only the iPhone but also the iPad on his person. So it's, as usual, there's not a clear-cut answer to anything. But my personal opinion is the way they formulated, and I probably, before I comment any further, I would need to carefully read the language there. But from what I understand, the way they are formulated currently, the arbiters are given way too much discretionary power over players, and I'm not in favor of that. I think that probably is it, because there are two very technical questions on openings towards the top of the page, which would be very difficult to answer in the time frame that I have, and also, with the remainder of my CPU available, I think I would probably struggle to answer them coherently. So I think I will wrap this Q&A on that note. Once again, sorry to those whose questions have not been answered on air. I will probably be doing more of this at some point, although not in the immediate future. You can't really, these things are in many respects much more difficult than Banters, and also you do run out of fresh material to discuss. But there will be more occasions to do this. And thanks everybody for submitting so many questions. It's nice to see that people want to know your opinion on various subjects. And there will be probably one more banter next week before I go to Moscow to play in the Tal Memorial. And once I go, I have some ideas on what I can do, but I don't want to speak about those because they might not materialize. But there will definitely be a reasonably stable structure of banters when I'm home. As for what I can do when I'm playing in tournaments, it's undecided. Once again, thanks for watching. I hope the stream was actually up this entire time, because I wasn't really checking Skype or anything, and if it turns out I was speaking to a blank screen for 2.5 hours, it will be a bit sad. But there's a local recording to publish at the very least. Cheers everyone, this has been Peter Svidler for Chess24.